Hello everyone, it's Jay from Dr. Puppet Who. You're probably wondering where episode 5 is. Well, what we've decided to do, we cut together episode 5, the final episode, at the end of May. And then we looked at it and we thought, this really needs something. It needs some big spectacular sort of end. And we thought, since episode 4 showed Betsy as the creature, or at least a version of her as the creature with teeth and the big black eyes and everything, that we wanted to see the creature. At least I would want to see the creature, and I assume that you would probably want to see the creature too. So after we cut together 5 at the end of May, we looked at it and I thought, we've got to make a new sequence. So we wrote some new pages and sent them off to the people who do our voices. Matt Chambers in the UK, Ashley Sadler here in America, in New Bern, North Carolina. And so they're recording new pages for us, and at the same time, we built a whole new animated sequence that takes place in the lower depths of the TARDIS, where a lot of the power is flickering and there's not much light on, and it's very dim and dark and sort of gritty looking with nice, cool volume light effects. But since that time, the BBC has made an announcement of the 13th Doctor. So we thought, well, it would be really cool, while we're waiting on our audio bits for our final pieces, if we could make a little 13th Doctor puppet, sort of do an homage, maybe a regeneration sequence after the Christmas episode. We thought that would be fun, right? So since then, of course, we all know who the 13th Doctor is now. And our 13th Doctor, of course, is Jodie Whittaker. Now, as you can see, she's got some interesting look. Now, we already know this isn't her costume. She's told us that in an interview. But I kind of like the look, and it looks like it's sort of reminiscent of Capaldi's look, the 12th Doctor's look. And her hair has this sort of blonde with sort of the roots growing in it at the same time. We don't even know if that's the way she's actually going to look when they get done regenerating. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time creating something that might be entirely different at the end of, the end of December. But I'm going to create something that looks like this now as a nice representation. So let's get started. I went shopping today and found a few things. Let me show you what I found. So one of the things that I noticed right away, if you take a look, if I zoom in on this picture a little bit, you can see that she's wearing a hoodie very similar to what Peter Capaldi wears, probably because this is supposed to be a representation of her maybe right after she regenerates. Or right after he regenerates into her. That's what I'm assuming this is kind of a representation of, because again, Peter might, right now he has that sort of tattered jacket on left over from the final episode. So it's very likely that he'll probably be in that when he regenerates. And he usually has been wearing, at least for the last couple of seasons, these little hoodies. So I think that's probably a nod to that. I don't know if that's what she'll have on when she regenerates. Who knows? So I took a look at this and I said, okay, we need to find a hoodie and we need to find something that looks like this gray jacket. I found in a secondhand store this great sort of dingy gray, very dark gray hoodie. And I thought, when you look at her hoodie, it doesn't look entirely black. Let me bring her up again. So if we take a look at this, you can see that there is bits of gray in here. So it's really hard to tell with the dramatic lighting they have set up what color it really is. It could be a very dark blue, it could be a very dark gray. So I'm going to go with this dark gray for now, because I think when photographed, it's probably going to have a very similar look. Okay, so here's the wig that I picked out for her. Now, if I compare the two, you can probably see that it's way too long if I pull back a little bit. But it was about the closest I could find. And you see the top portions up here and off to the side. If you look at hers, it kind of poofs up a little bit, like it's been teased up. So I've got to do that sort of after the fact, but I'm going to have to cut it to this same length here, which means that I'm going to have to cut the wig to about right here and kind of start layering it in. So that's going to be an interesting challenge. I went ahead and made a nose out of a Sculpey compound. It's a very lightweight compound, and I've got markers for where I'm going to have the eyes going. And of course, this is the brow across here. Now, this is a type of puppet that I make for my Doctor Who shows, but it's also very similar to types of puppets that I make for people who are doing their own shows. So I'll show you how I start and what I start with. Okay, so as you can probably tell, I'm working on a lot of different projects right now. Typically when I'm doing a female, I start with a head like this. Whoops. That I've built, and it's got more of a pointed chin. If you look on the inside of it, there's leather built. Now this one, because it's got a pointed chin, it's got a foam ball in the top up here so that I can grip it. You know, so I've got something to hold on to. And down here, the foam ball just helps to fill out the chin so that the chin doesn't want to collapse at all. Not that there's too much of a problem with that, but every once in a while, if you pull the fleece a little too tight, you get a little distortion. The mouth is always made of leather, like I said, and I've got black felt that I use on the inside. I use black felt because the Muppet style is to use red with the black tonsils and the tongue, and I think that's very Muppet style, and I've tried to get away from that look as much as I can. Kind of create my own look. I use the thin leather sheeting to bind the two pieces of the tooling leather together, which is a stiffer, thicker leather. You can kind of see that here. The thickness of the mouth plate is much thicker. But since her head is not as pointed as this one, which is what I was getting at. She has more of a rounded chin if you look at her drawing again, or her photo. So I've taken a head more like this one, except for the chin's a little more pronounced on it. This is a different type of head. This is a male head. But I've used one like that so that she's got a little bit more of a rounded chin, plus that'll give her more of a rounded face. Now their bodies are a similar design that I've been using for a long time. They're cut into 4 panels with a neck hole, and then there's these shoulder pieces. I've been using these kind of bodies for a very long time. The original pattern, I don't know where the original pattern came from, but I got the pattern way back when I was working with another group of people in Florida, and they got the pattern that they had created off of something that they saw. So it's kind of made its rounds over the years. The heat outside has kind of loosened the glue a bit. And I use a body like this, and then the hands I use have armatures on the inside of them. Okay, so the first thing I have to do is figure out what kind of fabric I want to use. And I have different types of fabric that I either custom dye or buy already dyed. Like this is a sort of a standard Caucasian flesh that you can buy of Antron fleece. I typically buy this from somebody who's already custom dyed it, as well as this tan color, which is really good for maybe a Hispanic character or somebody who's got a very dark tan. And then this is one of the colors that can be used for an African American puppet, or even somebody who's got a very dark skin. Then I grab my patterns, and I have my patterns here. These are a type of puppet that I designed with the 4th Doctor character of mine to be smaller than the other puppets, but be manageable in front of a green screen. So what I do, I'm going to go through here. And you see I've got a lot of different patterns. Like this pattern denotes the fleece pattern for the 4th Doctor. And I've got patterns for foam, with the foam cut out. But what we need are the skin patterns. So we need the 4th Doctor's head. And this for the body. This is my body. It allows me to stretch the skin across the foam, and then I know I have enough room to cover the shoulders. Okay, I'm ready to draw it out. Now, I've folded the fabric along here just so that I can make one drawing and then one series of cuts all together, and then I can stitch it from that. So, again, I'm using a ballpoint pen. Just do a little, make sure it's working. I'm just going to lightly trace the outline. All the way down, and across the bottom too. If you're like me, you probably have lots of uneven types of material, the way you cut and design things. So sometimes you have to kind of work around those. Alright, so we're left with a base outline of the body piece. Now we're going to go ahead and cut this out, and when we do, we're going to stitch it on our sewing machine, and then we're going to fit it to the body to make sure it works. Okay, for the sake of the project, I'm going to assume that you already know how to sew. So we've got our fabric, and you might see that I added the neck to this one. It's a new design that I have, and that's the way I do all my new ones. But okay, so I've added the neck, and all I'm going to do is line it up. And you're probably thinking, Jay, you don't have any pins or anything in this. You're going to get all jacked up. Well, these are pretty much straight lines. There's a few curves and a few odds and ends in there, but for the most part, they're straight lines and they're fairly simple. And I've got my stitch width set fairly fairly tight. I prefer to have a nice tight stitch edge just so that when I'm stitching, there's not a lot of loose threading. So I've got it all, I'll lock it in, take a look, and then set it. And just follow my line as precisely as I can. Okay, now it's time for a little bit of a fit test. And you might notice, this is my fabric with my neck attached to it now. The reason I started doing it this way is because it gets rid of that seam across here. Even if you brush it out, there's still a hard edge because it's been stitched. And I like this look better. But you might be saying, well, Jay, now you have two seams on either side. What about those? When you think about how a puppet's facing you most of the time, you do see the side and you do see the front. The front, especially if it's a woman puppet, the front being like a baggy area would be very unattractive. So the seams on the side can be easily brushed out, leaving the seam here, and it creates a nice tight form-fitting neck with not a lot of loose fabric. So let's just try to get it positioned onto our body here and see what our fit's like. And this is after, of course, I've already cut off the excess and tried to clean it up and make it look as good as we can. So I'm just going to kind of pull it over here. And I'm not too worried. I'm going to squish the body in. It's not a big deal. Don't worry if you get those weird little flaps here. We'll get those pulled out. I want to line up seam to seam. So my stitch seam to my glue seam. That's what the body looks like with the neck attached. And of course, once your hand is inside of it, you can see now why I do it that way. It looks so much better. And even from the side, it's not too bad, even without brushing the seam out. So we're going to stitch the rest of the pieces and get everything assembled together, and then we're going to start playing with accessories. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is create some eyes for the puppet. And I like to use a lot of 3D printing, just to create some different kind of eye shapes. So you can see here in this view that I've got everything from egg-shaped eyes to round eyes, and sometimes I have round eyes with a little bit of an egg point to it. And then I've been creating these, which are more human-like eyes, with sort of the cuticle right here in the area, just to experiment with to see what they look like. And I've been thinking of these more for women, really, just because when you look at cartoons and anime or any sort of like stylized view where they've created a cartoon version of a woman, usually the eye shape is very important to get that sort of Disney-esque stylized look. So I've been experimenting for a while with different types of eye shapes to create something like that. So this is what I've chosen to do here. These are the eye prints as I printed them out, and you can see that the little cuticle point that I was talking about printed out nicely. And these two shapes up here are two other shapes that I thought might work if I didn't think these were appropriate. Really, the best way to try them out is to try them out on the puppet and see what works and what doesn't, and that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so what we're going to do is take a look at how the eyes fit on her head. Let me grab one of the eyes. Okay, this would be the one to fit best on this side. Now, you can see we put it on there and it gives her a good eye. And if you look at the video of her, as well as like some of the stills that they've put out, her eyes have sort of a narrow look to them. Here, I'll show you what I mean. So if we compare the photo of her, this is one that I got off Twitter, so it's not the greatest quality, with what I have, you can see her eyes are a little on the narrow side, but they are quite open. So if I were to use this eye, I would need to create a very tiny thin eyelid around the top. I wouldn't want something that would obstruct most of the eye because then it would take away from the design. I'm still not entirely convinced this is the one I should use. Let's try a different one. Let's grab one of these. Now these are a little bit larger, and these are more like puppet eyes that I would normally use. A little bit bigger, I could create more of an eyelid, but you know what? I think the other eyes are probably better. They have more of a humanoid look and they seem to fit her look better. We can always make them, and if we don't like them, we don't have to put them on. Okay, so as you can see, what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've covered the nose with fabric. I've got the eyes in place, and there's a very thin black line which represents eyelashes, and I could put eyelashes on her if I wanted to. There's also a very thin eyelid, as I talked about doing, and you see how it kind of hugs the shape of the eye and helps contour it against the body. I think these eyes were the correct choice. They really look good. I'm also going to put a little touch of red in the corner, I think. I've never done that before, but I'm curious to see what it looks like. So for now, from a distance, I think she looks pretty good. We've got to get her hair cut so that the length is correct to the picture, and then we can start dressing her, and I think we'll have a pretty decent likeness. Okay, so now we've cut and trimmed her hair. Got quite a bit of a mess on the floor, but still, it looks good. And if you compare the look of the hair, it looks pretty good. Has a nice view on this side. I need to brush out some of the back a bit. One thing I don't really know about this is what the back of the hair looks like. I have to kind of take that on faith for now and maybe work on it after she's revealed in December. Now I'm going to get some hairspray and some product and just sort of style it and see if I can get the shape to be as close to hers as I can. Okay, so we've pretty much got her done. As you can see, I went ahead and I've got the eyes all attached, and I've made some clothing. I mocked up a jacket for her. This little hoodie that I found at a consignment shop, which was really cool. Again, because I think it probably is a little bit darker in the actual video, but it's hard to tell specifically. Also, I've been looking at her eyebrows. I'm going to change these eyebrows. They're not permanent right now. I'm going to change them because I feel like they're just too dark when I look at the hair, because I've got the roots showing, the sort of spiraling that she has in her hair, which I think it has a really cool look to it. So I added that in here to the actual wig, and I think it really helps make it pop. So I'm going to add some of this and just cut it down and turn it into some eyebrows, and I think that will really help the look of her character. I'm also thinking of giving her lips, but I'm going to take some of the skin tone and just lightly dye some peach, or maybe some, yeah, probably peach or just a soft pink into it, just enough to tint the lips a bit to give them that pulpy lip texture. And I'm going to add it on, and if I like it, then I'll just go ahead and stitch it in. But for overall, this is how she turned out. I wish I had a sonic screwdriver to give her, as I have no idea what her sonic's going to look like. But I posted a video up on Facebook, and or not a video, excuse me, I posted a photograph up on Facebook and Twitter if you want to take a look at the final shots that we did outside. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the video.